hello, everybody. This is The Rose Woman. I'm your host, Christine Marie Mason. Today, I have the incredible pleasure of talking with Dr. Nina Kraus. She is a neurobiologist at Northwestern University, studying sound and the brain, and how sound creates us, how sound governs us, and how sound can heal us. I had never heard the term the sonic self, but that's in fact part of what we're talking about today. How we can improve the experience of being alive by becoming more aware of our sound. She has a new book coming out, The Sound Mind, and stay tuned because at the end we have a giveaway of that book. Let's get to it then. Dr. Kraus.
Just this morning, we were talking about abracadabra. You know, with your words you create. We were talking about enchantment and incantation and how sound vibrates things into being. And, you know, for the most of us who aren't musicians and who aren't sound scientists, you know, it's kind of an ambient thing. But the power of vibration and sound is just pervasive. So today we're going to talk a little bit about sound and the brain and how the brain is making sense out of sound and how that's creating our cognition and creating our world and whatever else we want to talk about. Please welcome Dr. Nina Kraus.
Thank you.
First of all, I'd love to hear about the core of your work and what you're investigating on a daily basis.
The easy way of talking about the work that I do is just to say the words sound and the brain. So, in fact, if you go to our website, our magical website, which is called Brain Volts, you will see that we study many different things. We study reading and music and head trauma, concussion, bilingualism, music, rhythm, disorders such as language disorders such as autism. So many different things, aging. You know, so all of these important parts of who we are and how we interact with the world. And you might wonder, you know, what are they doing at Brain Volts? But it is all under this umbrella of sound and the brain. And part of what my book is about is to let people know how important sound is in the things that we care about. You know, sound is invisible, and, you know, we're living very much in a visually biased world. And, you know, I think that people don't often recognize how important sound is and how it contributes to our lives and making us who we are.
Yeah, and as you're speaking, I'm thinking about the kind of ambient sound that is present and we're not really aware of, the targeted sound that's meant to communicate. So all the input components, which we can talk about, and then also the way we receive it. And not only the mechanics of the way we receive it, but the mental biases and symbolism and meaning that we attach to the sound we are receiving. And so I wonder, like in the research, how do you guys frame the inputs and the receiver?
Well, the receiver is the brain. And so, you know, there are sound waves that you know very well all about because you work with sound. But then they are received by the brain. And the brain, the currency of the nervous system is electricity. So the neurons transform the sound into electrical impulses. And as scientists, we can measure what kind of a job your brain is doing at processing that sound. So, you know, we put some sensors, some electrodes on the scalp, and while sounds are being delivered to the participant, we can really get a sense of how their brain is making sense of sound, and very much what is important in how our brain makes sense of sound is how we have lived our life in sound. So our life in sound very much, you know, makes me and you today the way we are and the way we receive information from sound.
Okay, I want to slow that bit down. There's so much in there. So when I'm receiving sound, initially I like dominantly think of it coming through my ears. as a perceiving organism. Sorry about the beeping. So when I hear that initially, I think of it coming through my ears as the perceiving organism and translating into meaning, but I never thought of it as translating it into an electrical impulse, number one. And then the second thing that hit me was that it's not just through my ears, because I'm also feeling it in my cells, like as a vibratory thing. I think of deaf people, right? Who go stand in front of the speaker at a rave and like feel the pulse of the coming through their body overall. So and then that these inputs are the tonality, the rhythm, the pacing, but they're also the content. As sound comes in to the body, is it then splitting into multiple electrical current kind of channels? How do those different packets of information travel inside the brain?
Oh, that's such a good question. So the first part of my book is really about how sound works. About what sound is, and then how the nervous system, how our brain does this amazing job translating the sound into the electricity, into the neural impulses. So the first thing that you said was, you think of sound entering the ear. Well, of course it has to enter the ear, but a lot of people, when they think of hearing, they think of the ear. But that's just the beginning of the story, because we hear with our brains. And what, again, many people don't really realize, and something that we have discovered through science, is how the hearing brain is vast. And it includes, for everyone, whether you are hearing impaired or not, for all of us, our hearing is connected to how we feel. So, how we feel about the sound, so our emotion. It's connected to how we move, because sound is movement. It's the movement of molecules. And for me to be producing sound now, I'm moving. And so movement is very much a part of sound, and we synchronize our movements as well. So that's a very important part. There is what we know about sound. So if we speak another language, the different ways, if we're a musician, that we can think about sound, that is important. You mentioned attention. Are you paying attention to the foreground or the background? There's memory. There is how sound connects with our other senses. You talked about vibration and vision and what we smell. All of these are connected, in fact, in the brain. And really what I talk about in this book is, and I love, I study this, and I hear the story and read the story about sound in the brain and how it all is put together so beautifully and richly and magically that, I love to hear the story again and again and again, even though I know a lot of it. But so for the first part of the book, I really tell the story about how sound works and how this transformation from sound in the world to our own brains, how this happens. And it's really, to me, a glorious story. And then from then, the second or the largest part of the book is really about our sonic selves and how our life in sound changes us and influences who we are and how we engage with the world and with each other.
I have such a sense of delight as you're speaking. Lately, I've been really in this perceptual field of the way frequency works, like the way the giving and receiving of energy works in the physical world, like whether it's wind hitting your body and you're receiving the wind and your body is giving way and having these experiences and it's moving around you, or currents in the water, that this experience of being in a constant interchange with the environment, for me, has been primarily visual or tactile. But as you're speaking about sound, it's the exact same. Like I seek silence often, and silent is far from silent. What the quieter it gets, the more you hear. And the difference between being in the city and in the involuntary and overwhelming kinds of sounds that surround me in that space versus going out to our farm and being in the dawn chorus, or being down here in my little pod studio where there's nothing except the occasional hum of the fan, that all of those have a incredibly different impact on my nervous system. And I don't know if that's, like you're saying, my sonic self. Is that personal to me, or is that more universal? Can we draw conclusions about what kind of sound impacts the body of humans in general in the most optimal way?
Well, both. There are generalizations that we can make about human beings and the environments that they live in the city and the country and various things like that. But ultimately, the most interesting is how it relates to us on an individual level. But let's talk about what you said. You have been intrigued with this idea of Ian McGilchrist calls betweenness. So it is this interaction, this reciprocity from one, say, person to another, and we're doing it right now, right? And we're improvising. I mean, we are sonic improvisers. We don't have a script, but we are responding to what the other is saying. And there's you, and there's me, and then there's this space between us. And this betweenness is, to me, one of the most precious things that we have in life, and what I think is a truth that I try to bring out in my book over and over again, is that sound connects us. And so, I felt like this is something that I want to tell about. I want to talk about it from a biological level, because I am a biologist, and so can't hear you. I've lost you.
I'm back.
So see what happens when sound goes away?
I know I missed you.
See, we broke this connection that we were developing, right?
It's a perfect example. And what I was saying is, even in the world of philosophy, psychology, trauma healing, the buzzwords right now are field awareness. And that the possibility of healing exists in the field between people. It's not like located inside of an individual person only. And that if you're in a room working a process with one person and there are others in the room who are resonant with that process, they will also be healed in some way. And so the timing of this discussion on sound as the manifestation of the betweenness and how it's governing our lives all the time, I think is fitting with a global story that's emerging on understanding how we're related and how we impact each other, whether it's the environment or anything. So I'm super excited that you're bringing this forward now. Tell me a little bit about this sonic self, and like, what are the things that create the sonic self as we're growing up or as we're part of a culture? What are the factors in that?
Yeah. So our experience in sound, our life in sound, very much changes how we make sense of sound. And I think this is a general biological truth that, we have a nervous system that adapts and changes based on what we do. And again, I think that this is a very important point to make from a, how do we spend our lives standpoint, the decisions that we make, because in fact it matters, and it matters to our brain. It matters to biologically who we become. So, just to give you some examples, my husband is a musician, and not only that, but he has worked as a motorcycle mechanic for years. And so we'll walk down the street and, I will hear, oh, a motorcycle. And he will say, oh, this is exactly this kind of motorcycle, and it has this particular engine. And, his understanding and his ability to make sense of the same sonic information that I'm hearing is so much more profound because of his life in sound. And so what do I mean by life in sound? I mean the sound to meaning connections that we make. So when we're learning to speak, we're connecting sound to meaning. So, you, as a baby, you learn that things have words. And, and this is why the way that you make sense of sound is very important for how we read. People don't even realize sometimes that, they say, well, reading is visual. Why should it matter how my brain perceives sound? Well, it's in fact, before you can read, you need to make these connections between sound and meaning until then, you can eventually transfer it into a symbol system of, oh yeah, this particular sound looks like that. So a lot goes into our sonic selves. And so our lives and sound, for example, I grew up in a household where more than one language was spoken. That I think really made a big difference in my sonic self. My mom was a musician. I liked to hang out under the piano with my little toys while she played because it just felt great to be there. And so I think each one of us have our histories. We have our lives in sound that contribute to how we hear the world and consequently how we interact with that world.
This is a kind of a sonic literacy conversation. Like the fact that he can read motorcycle, or some people can read individual bird song, or you can understand that the parallels between different languages using different sounds to mean the same physical object. I mean, extend that in any direction. I was thinking of woodworking tools and how a particular kind of tool and a particular kind of wood make a sound, or, so to the extent that you're tuned in, or even let's take the trauma side of that, like the sound of a missile whistling down toward your village, like these all form different sonic imprints that then influence the rest of your life. So sonic literacy, and I want to tie it in a little bit, this idea of musicality. Like, are we all musicians that are just not literate?
Oh, yeah. Every one of us, with very, very, very few exceptions, we are all musical. And Isabelle Peretz is a scientist in Canada who has studied this for decades. And she finds that, if you look at a bell curve of people who are able to make sense of the tones and the rhythms of sound, everybody can do that with just a couple of people at the extremes. There are a few people who really have difficulty making sense of sound, and some people who are just like genius making, Mozart's. But for the most part, all of us, whether we are formally trained, and this is, again, why it's so important to be thinking about this as we live our lives. You have a baby on your lap, and you can take his little feet and, bang them together and sing a little song. And the baby, feels the entrainment with you and the rhythm and the sound. And, we're all musical. We don't have to have a beautiful voice, an operatic. You don't have to be Renee Fleming to sing to our babies, right?
Yeah. Who, by the way, Renee Fleming, if you're not tracking her, is also an activist for sound healing, sound medicine. She's even got a foundation that's doing stuff in that area. But let's go back to this. Here's the baby. Everybody's self-interested to a certain level. So they want to create the optimal sound environment for their own functioning, for their child's brain development, all of those things. So in this generalization category, what are the things that we can do to cultivate an optimal sound environment?
Spending time listening, just being aware that sound exists. And I think, one of the problems is that, we live in a very noisy world. And so, we've almost lost the ability to listen. And there are so many cues. I mean, even as you talk, one-on-one, or you talk in a room, there are sonic cues, just like as I can hear you draw in your breath before you speak. You learn those cues, and like if your good friend is calling you on the phone, even before they say hello, you can even tell by the way they are about to say hello that it's them.
or even what kind of mood they're in.
That's a huge part. That's an enormous, because, as I said before, the sound brain is vast and it is connected very deeply to how we feel. And so, right away, my sons will call me and just based on the sound of my voice, they'll say, "What's wrong, Mommy?" And you can hear that. And we learn so much. For example, we all know the sound of home. And you probably haven't even thought about it so much. But, for example, I was talking to one of my sons on telephone, and he was actually in Paris, and I was in Chicago. And so we're talking, and at a certain point, he could hear the birds that were in the background where I was. And I live in a little town called Evanston. And he said, Evanston birdies. Like we all know the sound of home, and again that's very personal to each one of us. I mean, it's a general principle that all of us have a sonic environment, but we know in particular what our sonic environment is. But so it's important to make choices. So, for example, learning a musical instrument is tremendously important. Or singing counts, of course. But making music is one of the best ways to strengthen your sound mind. And again, you don't have to be a professional musician. My gosh, sing to your kids and learn to play any instrument, because you are making, again, these sound to meaning associations. I like to think, as I said before, the sound mind, which is the title of my book, The Sound Mind, is vast, and it consists of, we can call our cognitive, sensory, motor, and reward circuits. So, cognitive, what we know, what we think, what we remember, what we pay attention to. Sensory, all our other senses, what we see, what we smell. Reward is how we feel. And motor is how we move. So that is our sound mind. That's our hearing brain. And music, making music, is the jackpot for that. Because think about it, when you make music, you engage your feelings, you engage your movement, you engage what you know, you engage what you remember, you engage your other senses as you move rhythmically and look at the people you might be making music with. Music engages the sound mind and makes us then able to hear and listen to things all over the world. Music makes us global citizens. Because, once you learn some things about music, it's a way of communicating, even if you don't speak the same language. I would say making music is one of the most important things, both in terms of music, education. That's something that every child should learn. And as we, get older, even in terms of medicine, the idea of music medicine is a very important part of healing. That again, I think that music should be an integral part of our lives, but we are in a position to make choices for ourselves, for our society, for our children, for educationally and programmatically. So here's an example. We've all been to airports, right? Airports are inherently noisy places, and they have to be, because you have a lot of people moving. And planes are noisy, and you have conveyor belts. So that has to be a part of the experience. But do we really need to hear the little carts that bring people along, going beep, 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 so loud? I mean, I've been to some airports in Europe where they have a little bicycle bell. It just goes ding, 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 ding. Do we need to have the television on all the time at the gates? Do we need to be listening to the person next to me is getting a text message every minute? Do I need to hear that bing, bing?
Or the guy who's on the loudspeaker who's basically telling you to, the terrorist warnings every 5 minutes, that like all of that stuff. I find that all so invasive that when I move through the airport, I wear these big, noise blocking headphones.
Yeah, and because that's something you can do. I mean, we really can make choices, but people don't think about this. Think about as you're boarding a gate. Every time the boarding pass goes across the little thing, the scanner, it goes bing, bing, bing. It's really loud too. Think of the poor flight person.
I'm just getting anxious with you
Right?
just listing all these things I have. Like, I don't even need to hear it. Like the invasive nature. So the idea of designing constructed environments, taking sound invasion into account, it sounds like that must be an entire field of expertise.
It ought to be, and it's something that I know Geneva is interested in interior design, and it's really something that every space that is designed should be designed with respect to the sonic environment. And there are some things, like you in an airport, you cannot change the sound of the engines. There are some things you can't change, but all of the things that I've listed, and there are many, many more, including the last call for the flight that they now give you the last call for the 17th time.
Right. You can change that. So you can take this concept and say, in the spaces I do have control over, I can design my sonic environment in my home or in my office. And the first thing is to be aware that there is a sonic environment and that it's impacting your neurobiology all the time. And that even just saying that will spark some ideas in terms of how you want to live, I believe.
Absolutely. And how, you already are wearing ear protection in an airport, for example. And that means that you've noticed.
Well, I didn't notice. I'll tell you, I didn't grow up in a particularly musical family, but I love music and I wanted my children to have music. And so I took them to Suzuki Method, which forces parents who are non-musical to come along. So if anybody out there who doesn't know Suzuki Method, it's a way of teaching music to children that mirrors musical families. And so the first thing you do is that you play recordings in the home all the time. And the second thing you do is you come to a group lesson once a week where you listen to other children who are more advanced than you, playing the same progression of musical pieces every week, from super simple Twinkle Little Star to some advanced symphonic piece. And then you go to a private lesson with your parent, and you are ear trained before you look at any notes on the page. So you learn to listen and play before you read and write. And so my kids all got ear trained, and I was like a remedial pupil in that environment. And when I started to travel, like I went to India for an extended period of time, and I was listening to Indian vocals, and they have 3 notes in the place of every one that we have. Their ability to fine parse the scale was like, I couldn't even hear it. For years, I couldn't even hear the subtle differences, or much less make them. Or you go to places where the language is tonal, and you can't, as a Westerner, often not even hear those tonal differences. And so this exposure to music, we're still neuroplastic. It's important to do it young, but I didn't learn it until I was an adult. So the awareness of sound didn't start until I was well into my 30s, I believe. And so, if that helps anybody out there, even if you're, 50s, 60s, 70s, like many of you are in my listener base, you can still change it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because people think, oh, is it too late? It's never too late. And we really know from a biological standpoint that the sound mind changes until we die, just based on the interactions that we have.
So we're going to limit invasive sound. We're going to encourage music. You mentioned sound medicine before, but can you actually heal the body through sound?
The use of sound in medicine is ancient, and there are various ways in which sound can heal. So one way is rhythm. For example, if you think of a disorder, Parkinson's disease is a motor disorder that affects one's ability to move purposefully and to move in a fluid manner. And it turns out that listening to sounds and learning to engage with the rhythm of the sound and the beat is something that helps jumpstart the nervous system that is having difficulty with fluid movement. So, again, it depends on the particular issue that you are addressing with music. Certainly for memory disorders, Alzheimer's disease, if you haven't seen a movie called Alive Inside, you should see it, because, it really speaks to how we have a sonic soundtrack of our lives. So we have songs that we learned throughout our lives that if we listen to now, because our sound mind contains our sonic memories, when we hear those tunes, we are brought to life, and these memories come into being and help a person become more connected with the world.
Right. So we have Parkinson's and Alzheimer's, it sounds like, has studies against them. What about things like depression or anxiety? Are there good studies of sound working for those kinds of conditions?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there have been studies. On the one hand, there is listening to music, but making music is really a very important part, engaging with life and engaging with the world. The idea that in schools, for example, kids who might be at risk for depression or at risk for dropping out of school, to get people actually engaged in making music, which is something that you do in a group as well as individually. It is something that people get health benefits from. And, there have been good studies showing that making music, for example, can help with a lot of psychiatric illnesses. But, I can tell you just anecdotally from my own experience, when I wake up in the morning, morning's not my best time. And sometimes I don't feel especially hopeful. And I have learned over the last couple of years that if I make it a point to make some music, just to sit down at the piano, it doesn't matter what I play, but I just play some music for, even as little as 5 minutes. And if I can make it, 25 minutes, well, that's even better. But I just find that making music from a mood and a psychological standpoint just changes my outlook. And so by the time I'm ready to, hop on my bike to go off to work, I'm God is in his heaven.
One thing in that approach is you're not just a receiver, but you're an agent in your own health and wellness. And the locus of control goes from receiving something that someone else has given you to producing it. And I love that. Like a good, in the yoga world, morning chant is part of the daily way of bringing in the morning. And it feels the same. We do a practice. Have you ever sung in a choir?
Oh, yeah. That is a great example of this betweenness we were talking about. Have you ever sung harmony with somebody?
Yeah. Okay. So exactly.
Right.
Like, or like I remember once being, when I was younger, I had a higher voice, a higher soprano. So I'm way at the far end of a curve of 80 people. And at the exact opposite end is a man with like basso profundo, and like to stand and sing and hear them echoing across and what the collective conjoined sound was, it was miraculous. Like just a sense of creating a whole organism with others. The only thing that I can think of that comes close, we do this exercise as part of the morning sing that's called passing the tone, which if you have never done is you sit in a circle, and one person begins a tone, and then they attempt to sustain that tone the whole time. They can breathe, of course. And then the person on either side of them, the two people, listen as deeply as they can, and they try to match and sustain the tone until it passes all the way around the circle, and everyone is singing the same sound. But they're doing it by first leaning into the person next to them and listening as deeply as they can and synchronizing their heart. And then beginning the sound. And by the time that's passed around and then everybody's like solidly together, then they begin improvising. And by the time you're done with 5 or 10 minutes of that, like you said, God is right to heaven or whatever. It definitely feels like you've entered into a co-created space of peace.
Right, because it is this reciprocity that we spoke about earlier. And I think singing harmony or this pass the tone exercise that you're talking about is perfect, because you are you're listening, and then you are making a movement with your mouth. You're creating a sound. You're listening to your own sound. You're listening to the sound that someone else is making. You are modifying the way your sound is and how you need to adjust and move your body accordingly in order to be aligned with the person that you are creating sound with. Creating sound and creating sound together is, in terms of something healthy that we can do and that we can foster in our world, is, to my view, so important.
We covered a lot in our 30 minutes, which is now over, which is a shocker. That went so fast. Everything from being aware of the field between us, the sonic environments we create, how sound has created our brain and continues to create us our whole life long, how to take initiative in making music and learning music and mastery, or to protect your ears from unwanted sounds and design spaces from sound. All of these things that are covered in this sounds like an amazing book that's coming out of Sound Mind, and the whole combination of just understanding and thinking about the mechanisms that are inside of your beingness that allow you to perceive this rich world of sound and interact with it, and then how that in turn creates you and you create in this field of sound play. And of course, the medicine piece, which to me is also super exciting, that we're finally getting studies that document what is effectively a superbly holistic way of engaging the mind-body for optimal health without a lot of invasive, expensive medicine tools. So I could talk to you all day, and I have the feeling that if we were hanging out in Evanston, those bells on campus, do they still ring? They used to have a big chapel and that's my sound print of Evanston, or like the waves crashing. There are things of like being on campus that had their own sound print. So I'll think of you there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. One of the things that I would like people to be thinking about, again, in my book of Sound Mind, you will find illustrations. So there are 80 illustrations that I've worked in partnership with an artist, Katie Shelley, to create what I think of as the art in science, which is, is there. There is so much art in science, and to actually convey scientific ideas artistically is something that I care about. And the other thing is the book is full of personal stories. I'm a biologist, and we have a lot of biological knowledge, but science is created by human beings, and so it's a deeply human endeavor. And I think that we can't lose sight of that. And so I hope that comes across in the book as well. Finally, I do want to make sure that any listeners, if they are interested beyond the book, is to do check out our magical website, which is a labor of love. It's brainvolts at northwestern.edu, and you can. I hope it's created for you, as is this book. This book is really created for an intellectually and spiritually curious person, which I think your listeners are, Christine.
And we'll put it, yes, they are. And we're covering a lot of topics, but all of them are aimed at creating more freedom and more like unwinding beliefs, or a little bit more awareness, and so that people can live a more choiceful and optimized life. And we'll put all that in the show notes. Hey, I just wondered, are you related to Bernie Kraus, the sound ecologist?
No, I'm not. But, it's really cool, the work that he has done throughout his life with sound. So we've been corresponding. Yeah.
Bernie Kraus wrote a book, I believe, called The Great Animal Orchestra, but his primary contribution was going out and recording soundscapes before they were destroyed by development. So he'd go into places, and he had a vast library, 40, 50 years or something, of these untouched native soundscapes. And he contributed, I want to say, to environmental ecology, the idea that you could take a 5-minute imprint of the dawn chorus and get just as accurate a species count as volunteers out in the field for a month trying to count. And then in the fires in 2018, his library burned down. And so other than what he'd already donated, I think, to the Cornell Ornithology Lab and some other places, like life's work of these incredible soundscapes just, gone. However, his thinking about the soundscape of nature being not only a valid data point, but like how nature governs itself, and was really powerful work. But I do feel that you both are doing such magical work.
Well, Christine, thank you very much for your interest in all the things that you bring to your listeners. And thank you for your interest in what we do at Brain Volts and in my book of Sound Mind. And I hope that that people will enjoy reading it.
If you're interested in getting a copy of The Sound Mind, please enter on Instagram by tagging me at the.rose.woman and at rosebudwoman, my company, using the hashtag SoundMind. Then we can find you. Also, make a mention of one thing that you learned from or enjoyed from this episode. We're going to poll a winner on October 21st. So if you're listening later than that, October 21st, 2021, then just go buy the book anyway and support the kind of research that Dr. Nina Kraus is doing in the world. Also, if you would do me a favor, and if there was something in this episode you liked, please text a friend the link to the episode, because that's how we grow. That's how we grow the listener base. I hope you're well. Perfect health, perfect peace, perfect blessings to you and everyone you care about. See you later.